Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to attend the webinar today, so I'll be back in a couple of minutes. So let's get started. So hello and welcome to the SEND National Trial Grant Expense Claim webinar. My name is Holly Stallard and I'll be hosting the webinar for you today. I work for Mott MacDonald on the Delivering Better Outcomes Together contract, which is funded by the Department for Education to support the SEND reforms. One of those areas is disagreement resolution and facilitating the national trial. My colleague Emma Bird is also on the call today and she'll be supporting with the Q&A, which is at the end of the webinar. I'd also just like to highlight that we'll be recording the webinar today so that we're able to share it with colleagues who couldn't attend. And the recording will be uploaded to the online toolkit so that you can use it as a reference when applying for expense claims in the future. So we'll move on first to the agenda. So we're going to start by covering the background of the national trial. We're then going to move on to cover some more particular aims of today's webinar. We're then going to focus on some key facts about the National Trial Grant Fund, and then on to an introduction to the National Trial Online Toolkit. We're then going to move on to the completing the claim form process and run through a live completion of these forms just so you can see how it's done. We're then going to move on to the submissions process and how you submit these documents to us at Mott MacDonald. Then onto the statement of grant usage, which is the last stage of the process. And then if we've got time at the end, which we hopefully should do, onto a Q&A where we can answer any questions that you have about anything we've covered in today's webinar. So firstly, onto a bit of background about the national trial. So we thought we'd kick off with this just to give everyone a bit of context. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the national trial began in April 2018 and will be running up to August 2021. Parents and young people are able to appeal to the SEND Tribunal about decisions concerning education, health and care needs assessments and plans. Throughout the trial period, IFF Research and Balmana will be carrying out an independent evaluation of the trial to inform a decision on whether the new tribunal recommendation powers should be continued after the trial. More information on the aims of this evaluation can be found in Chapter 6 of the National Trial Tribunal Guidance, which can be found on our online toolkit, which, as I mentioned in the agenda section, we'll be going through shortly. So as I also said at the start, I work for Mott MacDonald, and we at Mott MacDonald have the role of the National Trial Facilitators. And as well as this, we provide other services such as information and guidance via the toolkit. We have a dedicated help desk by emailing senddeliverysupport@mottmac.com. We run training and briefing events. So we ran some briefing events this year between January and March, and we're running these again next January through to March. And we also publish a quarterly newsletter, which you can register to receive by emailing the email address above just here. So to focus more on the aims of today's webinar, primarily, we wanted to show all attendees how to complete the claim forms to reimburse the reasonable costs incurred by local authorities and health commissioning bodies when attending or preparing for SEND Tribunal. We also thought it would be helpful to clarify the key aspects of the process with you, such as the submissions process, deadlines, and any other requirements. At the end of the session, there's going to be an opportunity to ask any questions you may have about any part of the process that we discuss. If you would like to ask questions, I'd like to direct you to the Q&A function. You'll find the Q&A button on the top right-hand corner of your screen, and it looks like the one circled in green on the slides here. If your question already appears on the Q&A panel, which will appear when you click on the Q&A button, then please click like on the question by clicking the small thumbs up on the question box, which you will see when someone asks the first question. We're going to prioritise answering the questions with the most likes, just in essence of timing. I'd also like to reiterate that this is a Q&A function and it's not a chat box feature, as this is a live event. So please only use this section for questions. After the webinar, we're going to be sending around a Q&A document which covers all of the questions and the answers made during this webinar, including those that we don't get round to answering if we do run out of time. So we will aim to answer all of your questions. So we're now going to move on to the key facts about the National Trial Grant Fund. Firstly, the maximum grant claim is £4,000. The DfE will pay any costs incurred up to £4,000. Secondly, the expense claim deadline is 3 months from the date of appeal hearing, or in cases where the appeal didn't reach a hearing, the date that the appeal concluded. The grant claim process is running for the extent of the trial up to August 2021. Thirdly, the local authority SEND team is in charge of collating the evidence whilst working with the social care team and health commissioning bodies. The local authority SEND team is then responsible for distributing the funds once they have been paid by the DfE to the health and social care teams if they had claimed costs. And fourthly, the grant is to reimburse the reasonable endeavours of the LA and health commissioning bodies to achieve the following things. LA's informing the social care team and health commissioning bodies of the appeal. LA's collecting evidence from all parties to be presented at tribunal. Attending an extended trial hearing if necessary. Forwarding response to recommendation letters to the evaluation team. LA's to make payments to the social care teams and health commissioning body for costs incurred in relation to gathering and sending evidence to the LA and case management activities relating to the trial. Sending a witness to trial hearing, and responding to the LA and parents about recommendations of the tribunal. More information on what exactly can be claimed for can be found in the expense claim guidance, which we'll be going through shortly. We're now going to move on to run through the online toolkit. So the SEND Pathfinder Disagreement Resolution Toolkit houses all documents you'll need and guidance and information regarding the national trial. And it looks like this screenshot you can see here. Some examples of useful information you can find on the toolkit include summaries of national trial decisions, template letters such as response to recommendations letters, sample wording for local offers, event materials and webinars from this year's events that we ran between January and March, and some fact sheets. So you can access the toolkit via this link here, and we're just going to run through it now just so I can show you what's on offer on this website. So this is the toolkit that you will see when you open up that web link. To access the national trial documents, you click on this section here, which says Send Single Route of Redress National Trial. You'll then get a drop-down section of all of these resources that you have available to you. So we'll start by going through the guidance and toolkit. So on this page, you can see we have a number of documents which will help you with anything to do with the national trial. So we've got a COVID-19 guidance document, which compiles a list of latest information and government guidance. We have the National Trial Tribunal Guidance, which I mentioned earlier in the webinar, which is a guide for all local authorities, health commissioning bodies and parents and young people. We also have summaries for local areas and parents and young people, which explains the key elements of the national trial. We have a frequently asked questions documents, some summary presentation slides, sample local offer wording, and many more documents. Also at the bottom here, you can see we've got ministerial communications. So these are any letters that have been published. We will keep those in this section here. If we then go back up to this section here and go down to event materials and resources. So on this page, you'll see everything to do with the briefing events that we run as part of the disagreement resolution strand. So you can see here we've got the presentation slides from the briefing events that took place this year between January and March. We've got a Q&A webinar, And we have the parent carer webinar that took place in November 2018. So they're there for your reference at any point if you need them. We then go back to this section again and click on Summary of National Trial Decisions. On this page, you can find published summaries of national trial decisions that have been issued by the first tier tribunal. And this one that we have on the website at the moment covers the period of September 2018 to March 2019. It's also worth noting that to download any of these documents, you simply click on the blue banner and that'll download the document straight to your browser. We then have the newsletters section. So many of you may be registered to receive our newsletters, but if you're not and you'd like to see what kind of things that we include in them, we have all of our previous newsletters that we have sent out on this page here. And if you would like to receive the newsletter, please contact us on the Send Delivery Support email address, which you can see here. And we'll also put that on the last slide so you can all make a note of it if you do not have it. So we'll then go on to the Send Information Packs and Resources, and we have a dedicated tab under this section called Send Disagreement Resolution. And in this section, you can find the Children and Young People's Guide, and you can also find 3 fact sheets which cover key information about routes to disagreement resolution, mediation, and Send Disagreement Resolution services. And these have been produced recently and they're really useful documents. So also on the online toolkit, as I'm sure you're aware, we have a section for expenses, and this is where you can find everything that you will need to make a grant expense claim. So if we click on this expenses tab here, this is the page you will see, and these are the 3 documents that you will be required to read and sign and fill out when making an expense claim. So if we go back to the slides, we're now going to run through completing the claim forms, and we're going to do, like I mentioned earlier, a bit of a live tutorial of how to do these. So as I mentioned on the online toolkit, there are 3 documents that you're required to read through when making an expense claim. You have the National Trial Expense Claim Guidance, the Grant Funding Agreement Letter, and the Grant Claim Form. So firstly, to go into a bit more detail about the National Trial Expense Claim Guidance, this document provides guidance to local authorities outlining the process of reimbursing reasonable costs of attending or preparing for a national trial Send tribunal. It outlines in detail the full process of claiming national trial expenses from start to finish, including terms and conditions, a detailed breakdown of what can be claimed for, and also some timescales. It's also worth noting that everything covered in today's webinar can be found in this expense claim guidance. So I'll just show you a quick example of this guidance. So this is what the guidance looks like. There's a number of pages to read through and it should answer any of your questions. So moving on, we then have the Grant Funding Agreement Letter. So this is the grant funding letter for local authorities to read and to sign prior to claiming expenses. The letter must be read and signed by a person authorised to sign on behalf of the local authority. The signed letter must be submitted to Mott MacDonald with the first claim they make. The local authority is only required to submit the grant funding agreement once. It outlines the process, any documents required and timescales involved, and also what can and cannot be claimed for. So now we'll have a quick look at the grant funding agreement letter and which areas we are required to sign. So this is the grant funding agreement letter. As you can see, it outlines the time limits in this red box and lots of other useful information about the different parts of the expense claim. Now on page 4, this is the section you're required to sign. So here it says, as a representative of the local authority, so let's put Waltham Forest just as an example. It is signed by a person authorised to sign on behalf of the LA. So for this sake, we'll just put my name there. You then select the date that you have signed the letter, provide an electronic signature, so you'll get this box appear here, and print your name here, your position in the organisation, and the address, email details and telephone number of your local authority. You'll see this has much more information on it, which you're encouraged to read and digest prior to making an expense claim. So, the presentation. The third document is the grant claim form with associated guidance that local authorities must fill out in order to claim expenses. So this form must be submitted along with the signed grant funding agreement to senddeliverysupport@motmac.com, the email address that's been mentioned previously in this webinar. You should complete one form per appeal, and please note that the appeal does not have to end in a hearing for you to claim. So let's take a look at an example claim form. So when you download the document from the toolkit, this is the Excel form that you'll be downloading. So this first tab down here is the index tab, and the index tab provides an overview of the form and what is required of each section, along with some instructions of how to complete the form. On tab A, just here, this is the instructions for claiming the grant, and again, it outlines the time limits and any other important information, such as the cost limit of the £4,000 cost claim limit. You've also got the expense reference number, which is the reference code that the grant will be paid into the local authority bank account, and just some other information about how to fill out the form. So on to tab B. Tab B is the guidance of what can and cannot be claimed for. So this is a really useful tab to refer back to when completing the latter tabs, which I'll be going through next, just so you're clear of what you can and cannot claim for. So tab C, this is the form that the tab that you'll be required to fill in with all of the cost and hour details for the appeal. So at the top of tab C, you must fill out your LA name and the date of the tribunal hearing or conclusion. And please remember that the date of submission must be within 3 months of the date of the appeal, hearing or conclusion. So let's Waltham Forest, and we'll say the appeal was heard on the 26th of August 2020. The form requires the local authority to then record costs separately for the LA, social care and health bodies. So you can see that down this side here. You've got an LA section, social care section and health section. The local authority has to work with the social care and health commissioning teams to collate evidence that will inform the costs being claimed. The costs must be split into staff and travel and subsistence cost for each aspect of the appeal you're claiming for. And there is also this column entitled Costs Incurred but Not Claimed, this one just here. So this column is where all costs that take the claim over £4,000 should be recorded. As mentioned, the limit is £4,000, so anything in this column will not be paid, but the data is collected for research purposes and shared with the trial evaluators. So for example, let's say the LA Send team spent 10 hours preparing for a trial hearing involving social care issues at a cost of £100. And they didn't have any in travel and subsistence costs. So you can see this has been automatically added up in this column I here. We'll then say the social care team spent 5 hours preparing for an appeal, and that cost them a total of £50. Again, that is totaled here in column I, and as you can see, there's a running total down the bottom here. The health commissioning body then spent 10 hours on response to recommendations, and this cost them a total of £100. And again, this has been added up in this column here and added to the grand total here. If we then move on to tab D, tab D is the final tab of the claim form, and this tab requires an electronic signature from a senior officer authorised to sign on behalf of the LA, and this has to be placed in this box here. This cannot be a typed signature, and we cannot accept a typed signature in this box. You'll then fill out the rest of these details, and as you can see in this box here, the total of the claim has been pulled, so we can see the total amount that you have claimed. And it is worth noting as well that all details of this form must be filled out for us to approve the claim. So now we've gone through that, we'll move on to the submissions process. So once you have read the National Trial Expense Claim Guidance, signed the grant funding agreement and completed the expense form, you're then ready to submit the claim to Mott MacDonald, who will review your submission to check the form is filled out correctly before then sending it on to the DfE for approval and processing of funds. So the whole process, as you can see, is broken down on this quite large process map, which can also be found in the expense claim guidance, but we're going to take you through it section by section, so it's a little bit easier to read and a bit easier to digest as well. So if we move on to section 1, this is the part of the process that we have just covered. So filling out the expense claim documents, the grant form and the letter, and reading through all of the guidance. The LA Send team, as we mentioned before, is responsible for collating and submitting the expense claim form and signed grant funding agreement, working with the social care team and health commissioning bodies to obtain information and data for the forms. The claim form must then be populated, as we've just run through, and the grant funding agreement must be signed by a person authorised to sign on behalf of the local authority. We'd also like to reiterate that if at any point you do have any questions or queries on the process when completing the process yourselves, please do just give us a call or drop us an email and we can support you with any part of the process. So once this stage is complete, we then move on to stage 2. So stage 2 is the submissions process of the claim form and the signed grant funding agreement. So once both documents have been completed, the LA Send team must submit the grant funding agreement and the grant claim form to senddeliverysupport@mottmac.com, the email address you've seen a number of times now in this webinar. We at Mott MacDonald will then review the documents to check that they are filled out correctly and that they meet the criteria that is set out in the DfE grant terms and conditions, and that the forms are correctly signed and dated. If we do identify any issues with the claim or there's any information missing, we will return the claim form to you with an explanation of the changes that we need you to make or any additional information that we need you to provide us. Once we've then checked these documents and are happy with them, we'll send the claim and any other documents to DfE for approval. The DfE may request further information or evidence before approving your claim, but if this is the case, we'll be contacting you with details requested. Once the claim has been approved by the DfE, we will then contact yourselves at the LA to let you know that this has been approved. So then we move on to stage 3. Stage 3 is the distribution of funds and completion of the statement of grant usage section. We'll notify you via email when to confirm whether the funds have been paid to the LA. And when the funding has been received, the LA must disperse the funding to the social care team and health commissioning bodies where required. So then stage 4 is the completion of the statement of grant usage, as you can see down here. For the period of the trial, April 2018 to August 2021, the LA must produce a statement of grant usage providing detail of the eligible expenditure for this period. This must be then sent to DfE at the sanctuary buildings no later than 28 days after the end of the grant period, so August 2021. So I'm now going to cover what is required of LAs in the statement of grant usage in some more detail. So the statement of grant usage is the final stage of the process. Before the end of the national trial, as I just mentioned, up to August 2021, LAs that have claimed the National Trial Grant will be required to complete a statement of grant usage. The grant recipient must produce a certificate of grant usage for the grant period, April 2018 to August 2021. The certificate of grant usage must comprise of 3 parts. That's A, the certificate of grant usage, B, the report confirming delivery, and C, if requested by the DfE, a financial statement of expenditure. The template for these 3 parts and the full details and guidance of this final stage of the process can be found in the grant funding agreement letter, which you can find on the online toolkit. When reproducing the statement of grant usage using this template, it must be reproduced on headed paper of the LA. So we're now going to show the template for this. I'll just get that up on my screen. So, as I mentioned, there's 3 sections. Section A, this one here, is the certificate of grant usage. In this section, you must provide the LA name and the approved project title is already in the template. If you then scroll to the next page, you must then insert the total grant amount received in the trial period by the LA in this section here. You must then fill out the boxes as shown below here. The LA's Chief Internal Auditor should provide an audit judgment as to whether the statement accurately reflects the eligible expenditure for the period of the trial. They must then initial the statement of grant usage where indicated, just here. So if we then go on to section B, that's on the next page. Section B is just up here, and it's a report confirming delivery. So in this section, you're required to set out how the funding has been applied and detail all relevant objectives. And then lastly, section C, and just a reminder that this section is to only be completed if requested by the DFE. So this section required the LA to provide a final financial statement detailing the use of the grant funding. This is a summary statement of all receipts and expenditures connected to the National Trial Single Route of Redress Grant Fund, and it can be formatted as shown here in this template. And as I mentioned before, this must then be sent directly to the DFE at sanctuary buildings no later than 28 days after the end of the grant period in August 2021. So we're now going to move on to a Q&A session, and my colleague, as I mentioned at the start, Emma Bird, is here to help me run the Q&A. So if you do have any questions, please put those in the Q&A section and we can start running through those now.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Emma. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to run through the questions, starting with the ones that have the most likes. As people have been asking questions throughout the session, there are some of the answers might have already come up in Holly's explanation, but we'll go through those again. So starting with the ones with the most likes, we've had a question from Jude regarding deadlines. So just to confirm, the deadlines for submitting claims is 3 months from the hearing, or if it didn't go to hearing, 3 months from the conclusion of the appeal. So yes, if you have claims from last year, it's no longer possible to make a claim for those. So I've got 2 questions from Jude and Lisa. So Lisa, can claims be made retrospectively? Yes, they would have to be retrospectively because you would need to know what the amount you're claiming for is, and there is that 3-month time limit on submitting a claim. So next one, we had from an anonymous. This is relating to hourly rates. So when Holly was filling out that form, she was just pulling numbers out of the air. So we weren't expecting you to have fixed hourly rates. It's up to you as a local authority to assess what's the cost of your time or the cost incurred for working on the National Trial Appeal, and be able to justify that in your grant usage statement. Next question. I'm going to pass it on to you, Holly, because I've got a few more questions I need to have a look that are pending.
Yep.
Is the local authority responsible to make claims on behalf of social care and health commissioning, or can they make their own claims?
So the claim must be submitted by a colleague from the local authority SEND team. So if you were part of a health commissioning body, you'll have to liaise with that LA SEND team, who will then be able to submit the claim for you.
Fab. I just had a follow-up question on deadlines regarding the date we can claim from. So you can claim the expenses grant has been available since April 2018. So for any appeals that have been participating in the national trial, but you can only claim expenses. There's a 3-month deadline for claiming expenses. So for example, if your appeal ended today on the 17th of September, you would have 3 months from today to submit your claim form to us. So I hope that gives it extra clarification. Okay, what have we got? So, question about statement of grant usage. Holly, does the statement of grant usage need to be completed for each claim?
No, so the statement of grant usage is a document that's meant to be a summary of all of the claims that you have made during the whole national trial period. So we do recommend that you do this as you go, so you're not left with 2 years worth of or 3 years worth of claims to report on. But no, it's not something that has to be done per claim. It's all of your claims must be in this statement of grant usage.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, I've got a few coming in now. So another one about hourly rate calculated. So question from Lisa about can people claim time? We probably have answered that one for you now. Yes, this is for reimbursement of reasonable costs for any tasks incurred in participating in the national trial. So if that is somebody's time to attend a hearing or to prepare evidence, then yes, you can claim for that time. Another question from Lisa. If the form is returned, does the date of the claim change or does it remain the date it was initially submitted? So yes, that is a good question. We are aware that changes might need to be made or additional information sought. So from the date we will start, so the date that we first receive your claim will be the date that we consider the start date. So if the form does need to go back for amends, it won't affect the deadline. So hopefully that helps. I've got a question from Anonymous. I wouldn't mind if you could give me a bit more information. Can council's costs be claimed for hearings? If you could give me a little bit more detail about that question, I can try and answer that for you. Another one from Anonymous. Holly, if an appeal is struck out, can expenses still be claimed?
Yes, so expenses can be claimed for any appeals that have been prepared for and not gone to hearing or have been withdrawn or equally have been concluded. So yes, you can claim any expenses relating to that.
Okay, sorry, coming through quicker than I can read. Hourly rate.
Do you want me to take a couple of questions while you go through?
So I'm just seeing where I got up to. How do we know who the authorised person on behalf of the local authority is? So this is, we're referring to it as an expenses claim, but it is actually a grant award from the Department for Education. So we haven't specified who that authorised person is because it may differ in terms of job title and within your own internal processes. So it's basically somebody in your local authority who is in a position to be able to sign a grant, a DfE grant award document. So we will leave that up to your own internal systems to decide who is the most appropriate person to sign that document. Next one, when will the decisions section be updated? So I'm assuming that's referring to the judge's summary that we have on our Pathfinder website. So yes, we're aware that we've got about 6 months worth of decisions summarised at the moment. The main challenge we have at the moment with getting those decisions out is just the sheer volume that are coming through. So we're expecting quite so many appeals to be registered. So the task of actually summarising those decisions and getting them online has taken quite a long time, and obviously the tribunal service quite busy at the moment. What we will be doing going forward is we're looking at pulling out some of the key decisions as standalone case studies, which we hope will pick up some common themes or any common themes coming through or arriving at tribunal, so you're still getting the learning from it, but without the volume that we have currently. So hopefully that will help. For those asking about the webinar and how to access it afterwards, Holly, do you want to just give a bit of information about how to access the content after this?
Yeah, of course. So this is, as we said, this is going to be a recorded webinar, and we're then going to go away and, like I mentioned, create also a Q&A report as well. And these will both be uploaded. So the recording and the Q&A report will be uploaded to the online toolkit, and we will inform everyone when this has happened.
Fab. Okay. Couple more coming through. I'm going to switch to most recent. Okay. Can you claim for school witness time at tribunal hearings? You can make claims for witnesses. So there is a section within the claim form for attending a hearing. In regards to barristers' fees, you cannot make claims for legal costs. I'll have to dig out the exact line from the guidance, but I can provide that in the Q&A write-up that we'll be doing after this event.
And there's also a tab, like I went through on the expenses claim form, which outlines exactly what you can and cannot claim for as well.
Great, that's really helpful. Yeah, I do recommend that tab on the claim form, because it does it has a nice, useful bullet list. Question about signatory, I think we've already covered. We've covered that one as well. We've got a few more minutes left. If there are any more questions, do add them to the Q&A. But I think we've covered most. The only thing I would add, I'm sorry if I've repeated something that Holly's just said, we will be taking all these questions raised, and we're going to be, we'll add them to our Q&A document on our website, and we'll be circulating written answers to all these questions alongside the recording of this webinar.
Also, Emma, did you answer the question from Jude about missing the deadlines for submitting claims for last year?
I think I did, yes.
Okay, great.
Just to reiterate that, yes, you could have claimed in April 2008, but that deadline has now come and gone because you need to submit within 3 months.
Great.
And the only other mention was from Lisa, who asked whether or not we can share some sample forms that have been completed as guidance, which we can definitely look at doing for you. I think that's everything.
Yeah, that looks like all of the questions. If you do have any last minute ones, please post them now before we end the webinar. But thank you all as well for attending, and we hope you have found it really useful and can hopefully refer to this when you do go to make your expense claims. Just checking for any last questions.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All good. Great. Thank you again, everyone, for your attendance. Like Emma mentioned, we'll be publishing all the questions with written up answers and the recording of the webinar on the online toolkit, and we'll let you all know when and where those are available. So yeah, thank you again.